Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us today. We're honored today to have joining us a truly distinguished panel to speak about energy innovation in the maritime industry. With us are Emily Federer, Sustainability Manager for the Port of New Orleans, Paul Matthews, CEO of the Port of South Louisiana, Mr. Carlin Connor, Chairman and CEO of IMTT, and also joining us in just a few moments will be Mr. Chett, Chiasson, Executive Director of the Greater Lafourche Port Commission and the Chair of the American Association of Port Authorities. Thank you so much for joining us today. And my first question for you is, what does the term energy innovation mean to you?
Yeah, I think energy innovation really talks about finding ways to move forward, looking at alternative energy sources, looking at the opportunities for sustainability. And there's also a geopolitical component to that. Louisiana has really been at the forefront when it comes to LNG and making sure that Europe is energy independent from Russia. And so we recognize that Louisiana is really dealing with an international opportunity from there. Also, we recognize that over the next 10 years, there's going to be almost $3 trillion of private investment for sustainability projects. And Louisiana, because of our connectivity on the rail side road and access to 31 states and 2 Canadian provinces along the Mississippi River and its tributaries, we have an opportunity to serve in a position of an all-the-above approach with innovation. And that's where we have to be. We don't want to pigeon ourselves to one type of alternative energy. And we look at it as energy diversity, but really energy addition, because we recognize that oil and gas is still going to be here, but there are these new innovative ways to do things. And if Louisiana is at the forefront, we should see a stronger attraction of foreign direct investments to our ports and to the state as a result.
Yeah, so there you go. For me, as chairman and CEO of a company that serves the energy industry, we're not market makers. However, we serve those markets. Energy innovation truly is an opportunity and a challenge. For our company, we've seized the opportunity to try to serve the ongoing energy transition. As an operator, we obviously are trying our best to understand our own energy needs and sources, reducing our carbon footprint as necessary. The real challenge, and I think we'll go into this later in this session, is how do you really innovate? And the transition that we all are struggling with is there's multi-front challenges, whether it's the economic challenge of understanding the risk of transition, all the way through the social challenges that we all suffer as well from or are challenged by. So it's an interesting time to be in running a business that is exposed to this, as it's no longer just looking at the bottom line, but it's also looking at your impacts.
I think those are great points. At the Port of New Orleans, we've been transitioning some different things from traditional energy use over to electric. Some of our terminal operators have propane, more propane equipment. Some have electric forklifts and different things like that. A huge thing that has been helpful is grant funding, and I think partnerships is a huge part of that. We couldn't do all of these transitions without lowering the bar of the initial investment, and getting people to try new technologies is something that isn't always forefront in their business model. And especially if it's going to cost twice or 3 times or more than that to buy a piece of equipment, the grant funding lowers that investment bar and allows them to try it out, see how it works, and maybe reduce the cost overall once more people start to buy it.
And I would also say grant funding is key for the ports as public agencies, where a lot of these private companies are very much interested in making investments on their side of shipping and logistics, whereas the public side may not be as ahead or next to them from an innovation standpoint. So we need the grants and public investments from the state and federal government just to be in a position to attract those companies. So I give an example. under the Biden administration, had the Build Back Better grant, in which GNO Inc. worked with public organizations throughout the state, and we were awarded, and the Port of South Louisiana was involved, where we'll be the first in the nation, second in the world, to have e-methanol bunkering. And initially it's going to be for tugboats in the river that are taking advantage of looking at these alternative fuel sources. And the hope is we're able to attract more major vessels into the river as a result. That would benefit Port of New Orleans, Port of Plaquemine, St. Bernard, our port, and also the port of Baton Rouge. We have also been able to attract businesses when it comes to biofuels. So we just made an announcement of a $1.3 billion investment by Woodland Biofuels that'll take forest pellets and turn those into new biofuels, and also Life for Tire that's going to take old rubber tires and turn those into biofuels. And I told them they don't need to worry about having any contracts with tire companies. Just go down I-10 East and they can pick up a bunch of tires and they won't have any problems. They'll have a surplus for the next decade.
Happy to help on the tire front.
Right,
as well. Yeah.
right. With all the trucks at Port of New Orleans, I think there's enough tires left over to be able to fuel that system. So it's incumbent on the federal government and state also to work with the public agencies so that we can be in a position from logistically having our infrastructure ready for those private companies that are looking at these different innovations.
I think that's another conversation that's been had across the shipping sector. When I go to different events where there's large shipping companies and tug companies trying to identify what shipping methods they're going to use in the future, what types of vessels they should invest in, where can I get the fuel, where if I invest in an electric tug, can I plug in at your container terminal to charge my vessel? So those are things that we're looking at, especially as we invest in a new terminal downriver, is having the flexibility to be able to charge tugs and vessels for shore power and invest in other ways like that.
Yeah, and I think you both really hit on a very important part of this discussion, and that is it's one thing to embrace a transition where you know exactly where you're going and you know exactly how you're going to get there. It just takes investment. It takes some courage potentially. It takes some technology and some R&D. But that's not the case with the true energy transition that's ongoing. Take the shipping industry, for example. We have multiple different fuel sources that are being examined. Some companies have actually ordered ships. Some companies have gone in a different direction. In fact, there's a multitude of decarbonized solutions that are being offered. You can appreciate that historically. You compare that to where we have been with the energy delivery systems that we currently have. And those systems have been built over many, many decades with very single source or very bespoke uses in mind. The idea that we now have to build multiple systems to deliver the same amount of energy creates a massive drag on the economics and the impacts. So part of the challenge we all are having is that there is no end goal in mind of exactly where we go. The goal is to decarbonize. We get that, but how we get there, it's pretty unique depending on the industry, depending on what your own situation presents.
Yeah, I liken it to the old days of Blockbuster, so I'm aging myself when I say that at this point, right? Being on a college campus, one I graduated from, but there was a time where you go to Blockbuster on a Friday with your family, and you had an option to pick your favorite movie, and it was either going to be a Blu-ray disc you had to rent, or there was an HD DVD. Anybody remember that? There was two of them, right, for high definition.
No,
we had
VHS tape.
You still VHS, right? I got.
Yeah.
There's something about that VHS we still love, right? Putting it in the VCR. And there was a time where you had no idea who was going to win the market. You just didn't know. But now we know. But what we don't want to do is to say we're only going to go for one of these alternative fuels. But we want to have that above all the above approach and everything. So not only we're looking at biofuels, we're looking at aluminum, all the different colors of the different types of energies that they have. We have to have that all the above approach so that as we move down the line in the future and the markets adjust, we are being in a position to attract those customers to Louisiana. So from a port standpoint, we recognize that shippers and major end-use companies want every single part of their supply chain to be green. And there's no reason that major industry and ports and environmental sustainability cannot go hand in hand. It needs to. And so anytime that we find a way, whether it's with the clean truck system, whether it's with e-methanol, or any way that our ports can find the way to be more efficient at our ports when it comes to being carbon neutral or minimizing our carbon footprint, we need to pay attention to it, because there's major investments out there that would want to come to our port and to our region as a result. So when Emily talks about infrastructure needs, and I know they're working on a major container terminal that's almost $1.5 billion, we have major dock improvements that we're doing. We're looking at a $300 million brand new bridge access exit that would have one stoplight for trucks at our port. Well, if those trucks are not sitting there idle, right, and they're able to get in and out of the port very quickly, and they're not in the neighborhoods, right, and the major points to get out, those choke points to get out of the region, we are in a better place environmentally. And so when we can get to those reducing the carbon footprint, being carbon neutral, and at times, in unique times, being carbon negative, we should look at those opportunities.
I would maybe add there, and Paul, you know this, the Port of New Orleans we created a truckway, keeps the trucks out of the neighborhoods, but also created a special lane just for the trucks to keep them from queuing up and stopping other traffic, created an appointment system to keep our trucks. So it's not just the fuel that reduces emissions, it's also operational practices. So lining up our trucks differently, getting them an appointment system so they know when they should come to the port and not just sit there and idle their engines, having anti-idle policies, and having a place where they may be able to get out of their truck and cool down instead of sitting in a hot truck. There's also auxiliary power units that the trucks can get to reduce their running of their engine so that they can run their AC without running the entire engine. And another thought that I was having there was, I wanted to mention our container on barge program, which is another operational strategy. We move containers between New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Memphis on barge. Each barge can carry 72 containers. A barge tow can haul several barges, and that keeps those 72 trucks per barge off of the road. And I've created a tool to identify those carbon reductions, the fuel savings, and just for the shipping company that uses that service saves about $1 million a year on diesel fuel.
Great, thank you very much. And one of the themes I'm hearing here is this idea of energy innovation and interconnectedness between land-based transportation, the ports, and ocean shipping. What are some of the challenges in integrating energy innovation across the different sections of the global supply chain?
Well, I would lean on the private sector first. I mean, it's you got to focus on your shareholders. So I'll let you start that one.
Yeah, I think the challenge, and I'm open by saying it's energy innovation and energy transition. I actually like to call it energy evolution, because it's not a very quick process. You know, innovation for me makes me feel like it happens really quick. This is a very long, drawn-out process that we're still in the early innings on. But it is an opportunity for private sector. If you have the right mindset, you have the right ability to serve the transition. For me and for my company, you know, we're 4 years in the ownership of IMTT, and we've spent about $500 million on sustainable fuels support. It's not stuff that I make; it's stuff that I handle for my customers. So it's a huge opportunity for us to be able to connect the decarbonized goals of the Valeros, the Chevrons, the Exxons of the world with their markets. As we go forward, there's a second step to this transition that I think is very interesting to us, and it's around the hydrogen side of the discussion. up until now, it's been a motor fuels or renewable fuels, renewable diesel, biofuels play. The future for us, we think, is going to be serving international markets that are hungry for decarbonized compounds like blue ammonia, and that is a vehicle to move hydrogen that has obviously good BTU content, but it's decarbonized for folks like Korea, who currently today are still very dependent on coal for their decarbonized efforts. They have to find alternatives that where they can possibly get a CI score, carbon intensity score, much less than where they are today running the process they have, and they don't have natural gas. Right. So they have to bring in these hydrogen molecules, and how they bring it in is different than, let's say, Japan. Japan is more of a hydrogen delivery model where there's a different vehicle bringing in the hydrogen. So we're, as a company, we're very interested in connecting those markets to their decarbonized goals. But let's be clear, we're not stepping way out in front. We have to have protection for our shareholders' investment. This is where I think the government support is very important. It's also extremely, I think, controversial, especially with a new administration coming in. How much of that support will remain is really a critical question that has to be answered going forward with some of these programs.
In public, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just thinking of something, but if you want to take a follow-up on that.
I was just going to say, the public sector, we are trying to respond to the market and everything that we do. So we're always waiting to see who's making those steps, looking at the geopolitical dynamics, as Carlin has talked about, but what's happening in Japan, frankly, what's happening in Europe with the issues with Russia and Ukraine right now, and how that impacts North Africa and Europe, and the energy needs all throughout.
Yeah, so I was just going to mention, shipping and getting our goods and supplies to the market is something that we all utilize. I mean, I see everybody in here wearing shoes and probably rode or drove in a vehicle today, used different utilities across your market. And, we get those things to market through our ports. And ports used to be very dirty before we had things like diesel scrubbers and different filters, and the way the energy was burned, so that's changed a lot. And something I also wanted to mention, the panel here, 3 of us are from ports, 1 a bulk terminal, but we're all very different types of ports. Port of New Orleans, we're very heavy for the region in our container terminal. We have a ship cruise industry and some industrial real estate, whereas Paul's Port is more bulk terminal, so bulk liquids, and Chett is a offshore energy terminal primarily, I would say. So, we have a different mix, but we all kind of tie together and use similar resources and support each other.
Right, and Chett, I'll pose this question to you. We haven't heard from you yet. So, what are some of the challenges that you and your industry are facing in energy innovation pushes from the interrelated sectors?
Well, for us at Port Fourchon, first, apologize for my tardiness. You bring a Bayou boy to the city, sometimes you can't find a place to park, okay? So that's just what happens here.
2 lanes,
right? All right. So my apologies. But, for us, it's about, offshore energy is our niche, right? Historically, it's been offshore oil and gas. Whatever offshore energy may come to the Gulf of Mexico in terms of offshore wind, green hydrogen, whatever that may be, we want to be part of the supply chain to help service that and make sure that it happens. Our customers are certainly already, our users in Port Fourchon, our customers, vessel operators are already doing that in the Northeast now. Obviously, we're hoping to usher in offshore wind in the Gulf of Mexico. But the challenges that we have currently today are obviously in trying to reduce our carbon footprint in and of itself on a daily basis, right? So the better we can do as a supply chain, as a port, to reduce that carbon footprint, it's the better it can be for all of our customers, all of our users, and just the general public, right, for the workers on the port and the like. So as we continue moving forward in the future, you know, they just had the EPA Clean Ports Program funding happen, right? The state of Louisiana proposed a $312 million Clean Ports application to cover 22 ports in the state of Louisiana. We were fortunate to get a $3 million planning grant because I guess they thought that we didn't have a plan together, although we had a $312 million application. We need to continue to push forward with anything we can do in terms of transitioning or changing, you know, diesel gen sets to cleaner burning or everything electrical, having shore power units, having diesel pumping systems change to electrical, and that sort of thing. So we're very focused on that at the port. We have an emissions monitoring system that we work with a company called SailPlan to monitor emissions in the port itself because we wanted to be able to collect that data for ourselves so we can continue to move forward with plans to reduce our carbon footprint.
Thank you. And all of you are responsible for large workforces who need to be trained. So my next question is, as energy innovation picks up, what do you see on the horizon in terms of potential changes in workforce skills or workforce development needs?
I'll start.
Okay.
From our perspective, in particular with offshore wind and the easy transition to go from offshore oil and gas work to offshore wind work, there's some things that have to be learned, obviously, but it's the same sort of mentality. Everything is coming off of a vessel to be constructed and built. So we firmly believe and know, because we're seeing it, that the offshore oil and gas worker is ready and able to do whatever other offshore renewable may happen.
You know, I think for us, it's not a major lift to retrain our workforce. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we're a liquid terminaling company, and liquids hydraulics, you know, the engineering behind hydraulics is well known. I would say that you know, really teaching and making sure the culture of the company is to protect the environment has always been very, very important. So, you know, we're not changing that message at all. We're just going to continue to reinforce it and make sure that, you know, we think through stuff as we bring on new operations. The change of management process is hopefully clear with respect to, you know, hey, how do we reduce the carbon footprint of what we're doing? How do we make it safer and also more environmentally conscious?
Yeah, I think another component is having our employees, whether at the port or private sector, to be technologically or really from a cybersecurity standpoint literate and aware of the dangers. I had a meeting a year and a half ago at the Pentagon with the CIO of the Navy, and he told me a great deal of concerns that could be serious threats for ports. You have a potential foreign country who has access to intelligence just from the distance between a ship to the port offices and having blueprints and information, et cetera, et cetera. There's phishing attempts and different things like that. So all of our ports and our companies, our tenants, need to be in a position where their labor is very skilled when it comes to cybersecurity threats, whether they're in the office or out of the office. And I just think that's a different perspective we need to look at.
Yeah, definitely be aware of what links you're clicking on.
Yeah, right, right.
So I just wanted to express how excited I am about the Clean Ports funding. It's one of the first opportunities that we're having in Louisiana to coordinate our ports across the state, and it's starting with an energy and fuel transition plan. the flexibility in the workforce, I think, is just as important, as you discussed, as the flexibility in what types of fuels we're going to be looking at. Most of the grant funding that we've been receiving also has a workforce component to it. So abilities and flexibility to train the existing workforce and new workforce for new technologies is going to be a big part of that. And as far as, we've all been talking about grant funding here. Another funding opportunity we have coming up, Port of New Orleans was recently awarded $7.1 million for helping our terminal operators purchase 7 electric yard tractors each and the associated charging infrastructure for those, so 14 total yard tractors, and 5 electric vehicles for our harbor police fleet. So we're working on our transition, but definitely lowering that bar, like I said. And within that funding opportunity, we have money for Nunez Community College and Urban League of Louisiana to help train the future workforce who can work on that equipment and operate that equipment. And paramount to that as well is the cybersecurity aspect, because there's so many more electrical components, computers, everything that's in there to keep those pieces of equipment safe from any cyber attacks.
Right.
And one of the other themes I've heard in the discussion is this idea of, whether public or private sector, this idea that you do want to wait. There's a bit of a wait and see in terms of seeing which type of energy innovation will predominate. Going back to your blockbuster analogy, Paul.
Right.
With that said, what role, if any, should the public sector play in helping to incentivize innovation, or reducing the risks of engaging in R&D for energy innovation?
I'll start. I think it's as you embark on such a major transition, and again, you're moving from a very bespoke energy delivery system that has decades and decades of capital investment behind it, lots of contract security or supply chain security associated with that energy delivery system. To change it, in the best case scenario is you get to use some of that infrastructure system, that delivery system, but it's inefficient at best. Most likely scenario, especially when you don't really know what the end use is and the end fuels are, you end up having multiple systems that have to be invested. The reality of how that happens is capital formation to invest in these types of ideas. There has to be obviously some support because it's just too risky. It's really we're not leveraging in this transition. We're not leveraging existing infrastructure as much as you would normally leverage when you grow from tier to tier. So this is a big part of, I think, how we survive this transition. And it's also, I think, speaks to why I was talking about earlier, that the timeline of this transition needs to be stretched a bit. We got to be careful that we don't rush too quick and invest in technology and solutions that become fairly quick. They become version 1.0 when we're already at version 3. So we have to be thoughtful about it. And I think the government has a role to play. Energy policy has a role to play. If decarbonization is truly something we need to do, put aside the fact that it's an international problem and we're talking about maybe a domestic U.S. support. If you believe it's a problem, I think we have to do our part to try to figure that out, and I think the government has a role to play in that.
Same, I agree. The public sector has a role to play. Us being public port authority at our port, the Great Lafourche Port Commission with Port Fourchon, we believe that we're in an energy addition, not necessarily a transition, at least in the immediate term, and we need to try to help usher that in. So we're putting that in action and working with, and y'all may have seen or heard James Martin speak already with Gulf Wind Technologies, but we have a relationship with them where they're actually going to come in and build Louisiana's first wind turbine in Port Fourchon on land. It'll be 187 feet from base to tip of blade. It'll be a test data collection turbine that'll Gulf Wind Technologies, if you haven't ever been there or haven't had a chance to hear or speak with James Morton, they're a wind blade manufacturer. They're trying to test different types of materials to build those wind blades that would, at some point be offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, to test that against the wind speeds and, tropical events and the like. So we're very proud to be a part of that project. And we're going to offtake the power, or hopefully we'll be able to offtake the power, 200 to 300 kilowatts of power that'll come off that turbine, so we can really show the supply chain capability in our area, and how that works to the port community and to the community as a whole.
Great.
Yeah, so I think going back to Carlin's comment about, deciding which energy is best, you don't want to be caught with your Laserdisc player. I'll make a really old reference there. But the public sector and private sector, I think, have a role to play together. Joint partnerships are going to be the main driver, I think, to transitioning to different fuels in the future. And something that I think can be across the board is if we're investing in our electric equipment, and even if it's not battery powered, it could be plug-in. A lot of our, like our ship-to-shore cranes at the Port of New Orleans in our container yard, those actually have big cords that are constantly plugged in. Those are all electric cranes. And maybe right now that energy is coming from a fossil fuel source, but it allows it to be flexible. That source could change from our energy provider in the future and be an easier transition, so you're not replacing every piece of equipment in the future.
I think, look, long term, whatever we do, however we respond, whatever balance the federal local government to try to help attract companies to want to come into our areas to foster this energy innovation. One of the challenges, I know we talked about this earlier, I didn't think about it, but one of the real challenges that we have is that we have a lot of voices out there that are outside of Louisiana coming into the state whenever there's a project that just says no, they don't want it, no, under the guise of environmental protection or stability or what have you, where we're trying to look at alternative energy sources that have a carbon neutral or carbon negative footprint. And so we have to fight that off as well. We've seen a lot of that with the permitting process, these anti-industry organizations coming in and trying to stop projects that are billions and billions of dollars that are going to create hundreds of jobs, good paying jobs for the local community. And so we hope long term that those organizations would come around to realize the actual positive impact that our ports are doing, looking at working with the private sector to bring these companies in that are different industries, new technology, to benefit the community. I know we've had some opposition, for example, from the Tulane Environmental Clinic, and I'm sitting there going, why, right? It's for the community, it's for Louisiana. So we need to find a better approach to hopefully have these organizations that are in opposition of innovation come with us to help make sure that we get the regulations that we need to attract these companies and create these jobs.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. We have 10 minutes left, and so I want to encourage the audience. My understanding is you have QR codes. I can't see them because of the lights, but my understanding is you have QR codes in front of you. You're welcome to use the QR code to submit questions. And we have folks who will help funnel those questions to the group over the next 10 minutes before you head out for lunch.
I have a question that has been submitted. Have the ports explored the installation of renewable microgrids to support electrification and shore power?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Our new terminal downriver, we are looking at implementing a microgrid system and shore power for that terminal. Another interesting piece of that project is we need to construct a new substation just for that terminal. So that is a huge piece of the project. Another piece that is tied into that is instead of using diesel backup generator, which our current terminals have diesel backup generators to run the essential pieces of equipment and things that need to be run when there are inevitable power outages here. We will have a natural gas generator that's on the outside of our meter, which also is going to be used through the Entergy's Power Through program, and it will also supply backup energy to the local community as a piece of resiliency that will help bolster the community.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Paul touched on community engagement. To expand on that, do the ports engage with their adjacent communities? And if so, what does that look like and how did it develop?
Yeah, so I can say for me, I used to work for the Port of New Orleans, so 10 years ago, I actually put a plan together for a community outreach program. And 5 years later, I left, and they've done an incredible job at the Port of New Orleans, building upon that. And they got it on steroids now, working in St. Bernard and the local communities in New Orleans. And we do the same thing at the Port of South Louisiana. We have to make sure that our communities, our neighbors, understand what's happening on the other side of the levee, because it's absolutely remarkable. It has a direct impact on them every single day, and there are opportunities for their kids that are in high school or trying to go to college. There's an opportunity for them to work in the logistics sector. And so we just spent the last 2 weeks meeting with over 400 kids, high school kids, at the Port of South Louisiana to talk to them about the opportunities, not only at our port, but with companies like IMTT, Associated Terminals, and in all the different types of sectors privately that they can be a part of this industry. And I always say to them, if you can do one particular job at our port, you can do that job at any port in the world. And so exposure, I think from a community outreach standpoint, is very key to develop the workforce for the future. Also to be above board and properly communicate to the community of what's going on. And you know what winds up happening, if you can highlight those workers that are working in your port or in the companies at the port, they are part of the community. And if we can highlight them, they very much appreciate all that we're doing, and they can communicate that back to their community and be our ambassadors. It doesn't have to be the CEO talking to everyone in the community. It could be the very own people that are benefiting from these high-paying jobs at our port.
If I could, I'd like to add that plug something that we're doing. Recently announced it, where we are partnering with Louisiana Environmental Action Network, which is a environmental activist group. And you may ask, well, why are you doing this? Well, we believe that's really important to make our community that is hosting our facilities feel safe. And part of that is data. Part of that is information. And we feel so strongly about our operation and our ability to operate within our permits that we're basically funding these community monitors outside of any regulation, outside of any permit, absolutely doing it on our dime and doing it because we think it's the right thing we're doing. And it's hopefully our community can feel safer, can feel better about their neighbor. I encourage other industries to do the same. I think that's one way to bridge this gap that we have with the lack of trust between activists in industry.
Absolutely.
And I'll add to that, how do we reach out? How public engagement? First off, all of our board meetings, all of our meetings are public. So the general public can come into our office and to our meetings and make any comments at any time when we have public comment. The other thing is, at least for us, is we video our meetings, and our local television station plays them all month long. So people can get on their local cable channel, check it out, look what we're doing, and call us if they have any questions or what have you. That's one thing that we do ongoing. Another thing that we did just for our future deepening work is that we worked with the Water Institute of the Gulf, created a group called the Partnership for Our Working Coast that included the port, the Water Institute, Shell, Chevron, Danos, and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to put the science behind what we wanted to do with our deepening, what to do with that material to provide the best benefits for the community, industry, the habitat, and the like. We also then socialized that with bringing a working group together of community partners, people that maybe own land in the area or work in the port, or we're teachers and live inside the levee system away from the port, or have a camp in the area or what have you, to get their thoughts on what our plans were for the future with that deepening, and just continuing to engage and make sure that everything we're trying to do when we're thinking about planning and the future development and all of those things, that it's science-based and it's community-based, so that we're providing the best benefits for the surrounding area.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions?
Question for Emily. Has the Port of New Orleans set a net zero target?
We have not yet set a net zero target. It is something that a lot of ports are doing. We're kind of looking to our first steps in that. Part of that is with the Clean Ports program. What does it mean to be net zero? One of the reasons that I haven't looked to doing that yet is I don't want to put something out there and make it totally unrealistic. I don't want to greenwash. I don't want to, just say we're buying carbon credits and say we're net zero. Are those carbon credits sustainable carbon credits? Am I buying a piece of the Amazon that's going to burn down in 2 years to support my carbon credits? So, being realistic about it is something that I would like to do, and hoping to build on that. But we are doing programs to reduce emissions and looking to the future to get that actively moving, but we don't have a net zero target at this point.
I think for all of our ports, it's more about progression as opposed to perfection for our ports when it comes to carbon neutrality and getting to that place. And so anytime that we're showing improvement, anytime that we're showing action and we are being proactive and looking at all the opportunities, I think that's where the successes are. And then that builds over time that everyone can appreciate.
Great. I think we may have time for one more question.
There's a question about decarbonization and what kind of assistance you expect to receive over the next few years from federal, state, or local governments.
I think we all have to wait till the dust settles after January 20th and see who's in charge of what, right? And then have those conversations and then respect their agenda and then see where we can fit in and start having those conversations. From perspective of Louisiana, we think that we'll be automatically in a good spot simply because we know the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader of the House, and Senator Kennedy will be a major member of Senate Appropriations. So we have people in very strong positions, and the other congressional leaders as well, in strong positions to where, as those discussions happen, we believe that we will have the right advocates in D.C. And I think even with having the right advocates, it's very important for our ports, and let's just talk about Louisiana for a second, that our ports speak with one voice. There are 32 ports in the state of Louisiana, 5 on the lower Mississippi River that make up the largest port complex in the world. We have Port Fourchon, and we have Lake Charles and Cameron, which is really focused on LNG exports like Plaquemines is. And we have operations on the Red River. So we have different waterways, different purposes for our ports, but really the same challenges and needs, and we have to speak at one voice. And I'm gonna put a plug in real quick. On a national level, just to my left, we have the chairman of the American Association of Port Authorities, and Chett Chiasson, he just came on board, is that he's our leader nationally now, representing all the ports in the Western Hemisphere. And so his voice and what we speak to him is going to be very important to what we speak to the Speaker, the Senate Majority Leader, the White House, et cetera, et cetera.
And Paul is on the board as well. So you have 2 leaders on the American Association of Port Authorities that are a voice from Louisiana, that are a voice for national policy as well as just maritime and port policy in the Western Hemisphere. So we're going to be banding together and working hard to make sure that the ports industry and all of the things that we need to get accomplished, we can do in this next couple of years that I'm chairman, but the next 4 years.
Great, thanks. And we'll close this out with a comment from you, Carlin, if you'd like the mic for a moment.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm going to be bold and make a quick prediction on what's going to happen with some of the decarbonization credits. I do believe there's going to be a rollback on the EV side. I think there's going to be plenty of support for clean fuel standards going forward. The LCFS credits, I think the CCS credits, which is the sequestration of carbon, I think we'll see support for that. I continue to see a lot of support for, I think, energy transition type projects. I just think the EV side is probably a little bit of a third rail for the new administration, and it's ironic that Musk will be involved in that administration. So I'm real curious to see how that plays out. But I do believe that the EV piece of what we see today will be rolled back some way, somehow. That's my prediction. Hold me to it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'd love to continue the conversation. Unfortunately, we're bumping up against lunch. So Emily, Paul, Carlin, and Chett, thank you so much for being with us today, taking the time out of your schedules to come to the campus and help move this dialogue along. Thank you. Yeah.